Welcome into the Inside Scoop. We are live from Nashville, Tennessee, and today is Wednesday, July 9th. As always, I am your host, Josh Newberg, and we have a lot of ground to cover today because we are in the middle of commitment season, but also I got Pete Nakos on the show. We're going to talk numbers, real numbers on Felix Ojo, Calvin Russell, also a few of these rev share rules and how the spending is completely out of control still. So we will have Pete Nakos on. We're also going to talk some Texas. We're going to talk South Florida recruiting and more. So let's get to it. All right. I want to run down some of the commitments that are going to rock the recruiting world over the next 3 to 4 days. So let's start at the top with five-star athlete Lamar Brown. He's going to go tomorrow, Thursday, July 10th. I don't know which way I'm going. Actually, I'm going to give you my predictions on each of these. If they're wrong, they're wrong, but I think I'm going to be right on all of them. All right, five-star athlete Lamar Brown, July 10th. I'm going LSU, but I'm watching Texas A&M. The Aggies scare me a little bit with my LSU pick, but the in-state prospect, I think he's going to end up with LSU. All right, four-star edge Jamarian Carlton. He's Thursday, July 10th. We got Baylor, LSU, Texas, Texas A&M. I'm going Baylor here. I think Texas is in a slump. Maybe a week ago, I would have said Texas all the way, but we're going to talk about this on the show. Texas recruiting kind of in a slump right now. So Jamarian Carlton, I got to Baylor. Moving on. Four-star cornerback Samari Matthews out of North Carolina. He's going to go Friday, July 11th. So now we're into Friday commitments. I'm going to go Texas here. I know I said Texas is in a slump with Jamarian Carlton, and I think they are. I think Baylor's going to get him. But here you got FSU, you got Miami, and South Carolina. I like Texas over those three. Four-star edge KJ Ford, Duncanville, Texas, July 11th. The Longhorns aren't in this one. It's going to be UF, Ohio State, or Texas A&M. I got the Gators trending in this one. KJ Ford, I think, ends up a Florida Gator. Then we move to Saturday. We got some big ones on Saturday. I don't know exactly what happened because July 4th is supposed to be the date when all the big-time kids go, and we did see a ton of recruits announce on the 4th and the 5th. But for some reason, the weekend of the 11th and 12th is even bigger. I don't really understand. I think a lot of these recruits sat back last July 4th and watched it and said, hey, that looks really fun. I'm going to go on this Saturday. So this Saturday, we're going to start. We got Caden Prothro, Bowden, Georgia, five-star tight end. Will it be UF? Will it be Georgia? Will it be Texas? I think it's a two-team race right now. I think it's either Georgia or Texas. And right now, I'm going Dogs. I don't think Caden Prothro leaves the state. Then we got four-star safety Tyreek Green, elite safety from Buford, Georgia. He's going to announce on July 12th. Auburn, Georgia, Miami. Give me Georgia. I think Georgia lands two in-state studs on Saturday. That would be huge for the Dogs. Then we got four-star offensive tackle, tight end, athlete. Call him whatever you want, but call him Hezzy Kent. He's from Brunswick, Georgia, and he is a monster who's deciding on July 12th. UF, FSU, Miami, and Texas. I'm going Florida Gators on this one. I'm going to go with the Florida Gators. All right. Four-star linebacker Rodney Colton, another one out of the state of Georgia. He announces on July 12th. Will it be the Colorado Buffaloes, Florida State, or Ole Miss? I'm not going to lie. I saw the experts. I saw Chad Simmons put in a pick for Colton to Ole Miss. I'm riding with Chad Simmons with Colton to Ole Miss. Then we got four-star linebacker DQ Forkba, who's attending IMG Academy, but he's out of Georgia. A lot of Georgia recruits coming off the board on July 12th. DQ Forkba gonna decide right here on this channel at 1 p.m. Eastern. UF, FSU, Miami, and Michigan. We had DQ Forkba on the show about 2 weeks ago giving an interview. Out of that, I just got the vibe that it was going to be Florida. I'm sticking with my vibe that the Florida Gators will pick up DK Forkba on July 12th at 1 p.m. right here on the Rivals Recruiting Channel. And the reason you need to be subscribed is so that you get these live notifications. I'm pretty certain we're going to be streaming Hezzy Kent's commitment. We're going to be streaming Caden Prothro's commitment. And we're going to be streaming DK Forkba's commitment. We might have Tyreek Green. I'm still working on that, but the reason you should be subscribed is so that when we go live, you get the notification. It's kind of hard to know exactly when we're going to go live, but if you're subscribed, you will get the notification right away. So go ahead, smash that subscribe button for me. We got to talk a little Texas recruiting, and it's not the normal Texas segment that you expect. I got Justin Wells here from Inside Texas. are the Longhorns in a recruiting slump? I only say it because offensive tackle Felix Ojo to Texas Tech, Jalen Lott to Oregon, Braden Rouse to Tennessee. Are we witnessing a Texas slump in recruiting?
If you've noticed a pattern with Steve Sarkisian in the last 4 years, this is pretty par for the course. It just feels like every cycle it's something different. And this year, it's essentially the NIL expanding with the house settlement and all that stuff's kind of starting to settle in a little bit. And so it's one of those things where you may have a few programs that are maybe promising some stuff they really can't just yet. They obviously can't sign anything just yet. And so, but I think Texas is being judicious. This is the same way Sark has been since 21, 22. They've always kind of had it felt like a slump in the middle of the summer simply because they just don't push very hard. You know, did they want Ojo and Rouse and Lott? Absolutely. Those were three guys they definitely wanted. They were on the big board for a long time. But they don't get impatient. They sort of wait it out. They use this time to further evaluate guys, to continue on and maybe rekindle some old relationships because of the house settlement and everything that's kind of going down. I think you could see a shift on August 1st when all these things become official. It's going to be real interesting to cover in the next few weeks.
So what does it mean for, 5 stars in the state of Georgia? Because this weekend we got tight end Caden Prothro coming off the board. We think Tyler Atkinson, the number 1 linebacker in America, could be committing this month, maybe early next month. So what does what you're saying, how does that apply to the Longhorns' chances at guys like that?
I think with those, I think their chances remain the same and steady with those guys. It's similar to them going into Georgia in the last couple of cycles and picking a few guys each year. They're in the mix for Caden Prothro. The problem is Georgia has the best relationship. They've recruited him the longest. They even have 2 committed tight ends already, and it doesn't make a damn. Kirby Smart and those guys recruit tight ends at a high clip, and they're selling Prothro on not just playing tight end, but catching the football and the flex out and things of that sort. And so he's definitely one. Tyler Atkinson is one now that it's funny because I went to see him in Grayson last year and great kid, great family, tremendous prospect. But Texas and him kind of went dead silent for, it felt like 6 months. And it just seemed like they're kind of going in their own direction. Then Atkinson shows up in Austin in June, starts working out with former Longhorn Derek Johnson. And Sark says, hey, why don't you come by the campus for an official visit? Let's just see how things are going. And now it looks like it's a Texas-Georgia battle with a few other guys kind of looking from the inside, from the outside in. I think with Prothro, you're really battling against a big power in Georgia in-state. Texas is going to get their fair share from them, but I think Smart probably keeps him in-state. We're still watching that one. But it's interesting with Atkinson because with Rouse, they really wanted Rouse. And if you watch Rouse's tape, that's the best linebacker tape in 2026. He is tremendous. Tennessee got an absolute dude. But Tyler Atkinson can track and smack. And I think it's going to be substantial with Atkinson because I think his NIL deal is going to be significant compared to others.
Yeah, and, I'm not down on Texas. Obviously, they finished number 1 last year. Something didn't just break overnight, and they can't recruit. Trust me. But when could they bust out of this slump? Because we got a couple decisions coming up. Jamarian Carlton tomorrow on July 10th. He's an elite edge. Also, Hezzy Kent, the tight end athlete, offensive tackle, whatever you want to call him, he's committing on Saturday. So who could bust Texas out of this slump that they're in right now?
Samari Matthews. North Carolina cornerback, 4-star, Mark Orphe special. He's been on this kid. This was the kid that he set his official visit the day he was offered. And he came for an unofficial in April, and Texas absolutely killed it. And I think they really solidified themselves as the team to beat. He took his last OV was to South Carolina. And I think Beamer and those guys did a great job. They've also built a tremendous relationship there. But I think the allure of Texas is just too much for Samari, and he's kind of a culture fit in a lot of ways. Just talking to him, just getting to know him. So I think Samari could be one that could probably bust out. We just posted a preview of Jamarian Carlton this morning at InsideTexas.com. There's 6 RPMs to Texas right now, including mine and Eric Noleen's. Now we're monitoring that and watching it because there's going to be a decision tomorrow. But as of right now, we're not changing them. That could change by the minute. Sure. We have learned this summer. Things can change on a dime. And so there's a possibility there. With Hezzy Kent, Texas would love to get this guy on campus to play tight end. I think part of the Prothrow push is maybe not feeling as good with Kent. It feels like Florida and Miami are kind of battling for. Again, Miami's selling him at playing tight end as well, but the latest buzz has Florida looking better and better for him. And so if you're asking me, out of those three, I'd probably take Samari Matthews. I feel really good about him. They're still battling with Carlton. That's going to come down to the wire. And I think Kent is trending a little bit more in state or out of state or closer to the state of Florida.
All right, so Texas currently sitting at number 16 in the Rivals recruiting rankings. They have 17 total commitments, so plenty of room for more. Don't expect this to stop right now, but where do you feel Texas could finish when it's all said and done, when the dust settles? Because it doesn't matter who you have committed in July. It matters when signing day rolls around in December and February. What's your expectations on where Texas finishes? Inside Scoop listeners, I got to tell you about a company that makes this show possible. It's Rhoback Activewear. The only way to describe Rhoback is best fit, best feel. And for those who are not familiar with Rhoback, they are completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Rhoback has released so many items within their new licensed game day collection, and it's our favorite. With novel polo designs, clean hoodie, and quarter zip designs from some of your favorite schools, it's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else in the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Rhoback's everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They are both super comfortable. They have an elastic waistband and a great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for everyday movement. Rhoback also has been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. So use code JOSH on Rhoback.com for a generous 20% off all new custom orders through the end of this week. Let's spell it out for you. RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with promo code JOSH.
You know, last year, I think the staff had an idea of wanting the number one class. I think they wanted that distinction, which is odd because Sark isn't really a rankings guy. But if you'll notice in the last 4 cycles, we talked about how they've kind of taken it on the chin in the middle of the summertime. The pattern in December is much different.
Right.
They close fast and they close hard. Some of these guys are going to flip. It's inevitable. The August 1st date is I think you're going to see some kids decommit when that thing sticks. But in like you said, November, December, right up to signing day is when it really matters. I think top 5 is probably the expectation. Mm-hmm. And you know how you get into that? You got to land some 5 stars. Right. You're going to have to turn a Prothrow. You're going to have to grab an Atkinson. You're going to have to snag a Derek Cooper, who I think Texas is in a very sneaky spot with right now. This kid was all but done to Miami and decided to postpone his commitment so he could come visit Texas. And I think that one is actually trending Austin right now. And so I think top 5 is the expectation right now with the amount of money fake money that's being thrown around. It's hard to tell because you've got some schools. What does USC have, like 25, 30 commitments? Yeah. A&M's kind of up there as well.
But you don't think that's real money at USC and A&M?
No, I think it's real on the surface. I think these agreements are just that. Mm-hmm. They're agreements. They're not contracts. These are agreements. You can't have, right up now, you can't have the third-party NIL deals. That's illegal. You can't have some of these things. And so I coined that term from Pete Nakos because I think he has been really ahead of the curve on what these contracts really mean in the NIL era. I suggest everyone give that guy a follow. He is very keen on it. Our Joe Cook at Inside Texas is actually putting together a story right now coming from some reporting of Ross Dellinger last night that is really trying to kind of put the floor out. But it's just hard to tell right now because Ohio State's going to finish strong. Yeah. Alabama. Alabama has been as hot as anybody in the last month. I could see them with a top class. And then there's Georgia.
Yeah.
Like Georgia's still kind of getting who they want for the most part. I mean, they might lose a flip here and there, but they're steady as it comes. And so you're going to have to land some 5 stars to jump into that top 5 mix. And I think it's going to have to be guys like you're going to have to get an Atkinson, you're going to have to get a Derek Cooper, you're going to have to add a Samari Matthews, and you're going to have to flip an offensive tackle. I'm pretty sure that that's the goal right now. They're going to rekindle some of these relationships with guys like Malachi Lee out of Hawaii that's committed to Michigan, Zayden Crimpin out of Prosper that's committed to Texas A&M. Those guys are solid. Maybe even Samuel Roseborough, who's also committed to Texas A&M. Those guys are solid, but I think you're going to see Texas flip one of those guys potentially. That's how you get to a top 5 class, and I think that's Sark and those guys won't really start worrying about that until probably late November, early December.
All right. Well, Texas fans chime in. What's your level of concern, or what is your level of excitement for the finish of this class? Let us know. Comment section below. Let's talk a little South Florida recruiting with Rivals national analyst Marcus Benjamin. Marcus, you are making your debut here on the Inside Scoop. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, Josh.
All right, we're throwing you right into the fire. We're starting with running back Derek Cooper. We talk a lot about his recruitment on this channel. So I wanted to get your point of view on this. You're down there. You are with him a lot. And how do you see this recruitment shaking up?
Yeah, this has been an interesting one for sure. I think you got to start with Miami, hometown kid, obviously out of Chaminade, Madonna High School, powerhouse down there. Miami's done a great job in recruiting him as he's visited Miami several times. So I think Miami is in a good spot to keep him back home. But you have to watch out for the Georgia Bulldogs because Georgia obviously made a great impression with him a while back on an unofficial visit that caused him to commit to the Bulldogs. It seemed like for a split second, but the relationship is still strong between Cooper and the Bulldogs. So I would definitely watch Georgia in this recruitment. But now Texas is starting to make a move here. I saw Cooper at OT7 Nationals, and he was all decked out in Texas gear. And from what I gathered from him, that he is looking to visit Texas during the season. And, was off of a recent visit to Austin as well. So the Longhorns definitely made a big impression on him. So if I had to say an unofficial top 3 at the moment, it would probably be Miami, Georgia, and Texas. We're still waiting to see when he is going to commit. He originally was going to commit in early July, but he has since delayed that commitment. I should be able to see him this weekend as he's participating in a 7-on-7 tournament down here in South Florida called the Crib Classic. So I'm hoping to get an update by the weekend.
Yeah, Derek Cooper could be taking this thing into the season. We'll see. I want to rewind a second. One recruitment that isn't going into, well, it still could, but Calvin Russell. And you were there. You were at that. I won't even call it a commitment. I'm going to call it an event because Calvin Russell walked in there like he looked like Mike Tyson in his prime, walking in 2 hours late to his own commitment ceremony with his posse, with all his boys coming in and making his commitment to Syracuse. What was the vibe like at that commitment?
Well, it was definitely Miami to the fullest. So with all the glitz and glamour, I felt like the entire community that surrounded him was there at the event. It was positive vibes going all around. Of course, his mother was kind of organizing the all event with, his handler as well. It was definitely an event that gained in people or population. It just the crowd just kept getting bigger and bigger, and he did arrive fashionably late, about an hour after his scheduled commitment. He was scheduled to commit at 9. Actually didn't commit until 10. And the vibe around that venue was all positive. Like I said, Michigan and Syracuse seemed like the popular choices kind of going into. I was asking around, just the coaches, players, and just others around just to kind of gauge where they thought he would go. and a lot of people did think it was Syracuse, and Fran Brown and the Orange did end up winning in the end. So it was a great event, and I hadn't been to an event quite like that in all my times covering recruiting and announcements. But it was definitely one to remember, I would
Yeah,
say.
an exciting win for Fran Brown and Syracuse. And I hate to say this now in the dust has just barely settled on his commitment, but do you think that we hear from Calvin Russell's recruitment again?
I don't think so. I believe that he probably will take maybe a visit or two, just
Mm-hmm.
because after the momentum of this announcement kind of dies down a bit,
Right.
and we'll see what kind of season Syracuse has. If the Orange ends up falling flat in their face and wins just 4 or 5 games, then
It'll be tough.
I
Yeah.
would I would think that I would maybe open up some things for Calvin Russell. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as what he communicated that night, he is 110% solid with the Orange. He's kind of tired of the recruitment process. This is a kid that has been recruited since he was a freshman,
Yeah.
and he's been recruited very highly by all the major schools. So I got the sense that he was done with the recruitment, kind of wants to move on with his life and his senior season to see if he can win back-to-back state championships with Miami Northwestern.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm not trying to like stir up any drama here, but it's just kind of how recruiting goes. So let's move on to another prospect that has been recruited really for a couple of years since he hit the scene. That's offensive lineman Brett Kolage. He's at IMG Academy now. We don't have a decision date for him, but who do you think is at the or near the top of this recruitment for Brett Kolage?
Well, it's coming down to 4 schools for Brett Kolage: Miami, Georgia, USC, and Oklahoma. Those are the 4 contending schools from what I gathered, with Miami and Georgia with a slight lead on the other 2 schools. So I think this is going to come down to Miami and Georgia. Georgia, I think, has made probably the most momentum
Mm-hmm.
with College as of late, but the Hurricanes are a team that you really cannot count out as well. I think Mario Cristobal and offensive line coach Alex Mirabal have proven that they can not only recruit at a high level, but develop at a high
Mm-hmm.
level as well. Francis Malinois is projected to be one of the top players taken in the 2026 draft. And of course, I believe that is one of the selling points that the Hurricanes are using for Brett Kolage. Miami has already a loaded class with multiple top tier offensive linemen. So if they add a Brett Kolage, it'd be hard to argue that their class would be uh, not better, not the best in the country. Georgia, of course, is a player that you have to watch pretty much in every recruitment if they are involved,
Yeah.
because Georgia has been successful in not only recruiting but also on the field as well, winning championships in the recent years. So they have that going for them. So I think it's pretty much a 2-team race, but it's going to come down to those 4 schools.
All right, to Darius Hughes. The race should be over here. He's committed to Florida State, top 200 DB, one of the best players in the state of Florida. But there's some rumors swirling that maybe there's some flip talk with Darius Hughes. Who's involved here?
Yeah, Tadarius Hughes, I think, is pretty solid with Florida State, but I think you have to be concerned with a lot of teams here. I think that the Florida schools will be involved. Miami has said to be involved as well as Florida. I think Syracuse has a chance as well. But I think for the most part, I think Tadarius Hughes will probably stay locked in with the Florida State
Mm-hmm.
Seminoles, but I think he will kind of entertain different schools along the way. So I think that it's an interesting recruitment to kind of watch, because he is now going to be more so in the limelight with like a Calvin Russell at Miami Northwestern, which is one of the powerhouse teams down here in South Florida. So I do believe that he sticks with the Seminoles, but there could be some other teams involved down the line.
All right. When it comes to the state of Florida, the top 25 recruits in the state of Florida are all committed except for 2, and one of them is wide receiver Samorian Wingo, ranked at number 22 in the state of Florida. And wide receivers have been coming off the board nationally, just left and right. So do you get a sense that Wingo could be soon, and who are the real players for him?
Yeah, I do think he, just like these others that are uncommitted, are hoping to commit before the season starts, really kind of get their commitment out of the way before they roll into their senior season. Samarian Wingo, outstanding talent. First off, I do want to say he's a player that's maybe somewhat under the radar that could end up being one of the best receivers in college football down the line. I think it's going to come down to Florida and South Carolina, although there's some other players involved. Alabama and Miami are some teams that are involved in his recruitment. But when I spoke to him recently at OT7, I got the sense that South Carolina and Florida are the teams that are out in front in his recruitment. So I wouldn't be surprised either way if he decided to stay closer to home to Florida, or he headed up north to Columbia in South Carolina. I think those are the top 2 players here to watch here in the summer.
All right. Marcus Benjamin, thank you. We will be tapping in regularly. You are in a hotbed of recruiting down there in South Florida. Thank you for joining us on the Inside Scoop today.
Thanks for having me, Josh. Look forward to coming on the show again.
We're going to talk a little dollars and cents with NIL expert Pete Nakos of On3. And over the weekend, there was a lot of news on the 4th of July, none bigger than Felix Ojo, the elite offensive tackle, the 5-star offensive tackle, out of the state of Texas, choosing Texas Tech over Texas, Michigan, Oklahoma, and a bunch of others. So let's bring in Pete Nakos. Pete, the Felix Ojo deal, it created a ton of buzz, a lot of stir, but where did it rank among where the offensive tackles, Jackson Cantwell, maybe even David Sanders, where does his NIL deal rank amongst some of these big offensive tackles?
Yeah, so Felix Ojo commits to Texas Tech, picks them over Texas and Ohio State on the 4th of July, and his agent, Derek Shelby, puts out it's a $5.1 million fully guaranteed deal over 3 years, but did some double checking, talked to some Texas Tech sources. It's much more like a $2.3 million deal over 3 years, set to pay him about $775 annually. Where's that rank? So it's less than Jackson Cantwell is going to make in year 1 at Miami, because he's supposed to make in the 2.5 range, and it's less than what David Sanders is going to make this first year at Tennessee. So in the world of offensive line recruits, I mean, the $775 annually is not the most money we've heard. But the fact that it is 3 years for $775 definitely stacks up with some of the higher we've heard.
I'm a little surprised that Texas would lose this battle. I mean, we're not, we're talking Texas, Michigan. We're talking some big players in the NIL game. So why didn't Texas match, or why didn't Texas go over the top? Do you have any sense of why?
Yeah, this wasn't as much a financial thing as it was how long the deal was. I mean, 3 years is a substantial commitment to a player that isn't on campus yet, isn't in your weight room, and you don't really know how it's all going to pan out on the field. Obviously, our guy Charles Power is back there trying to great guys, and he does a fantastic job, but there's obviously still a risk when you spend $775 a year for 3 years on an offensive tackle.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, moving on. There was another big decision that came on July 5th. Calvin Russell, in a ceremony of all ceremonies, he looked like a prize fighter walking into the ring with his entourage. Calvin Russell walks in and commits to Syracuse over Michigan and Miami. And on our show on Sunday, I said this was one of these deals that could only happen in the NIL era, but I don't know what I was talking about, because if you even look at who was in the battle for this one, you had Syracuse basically over, and there was a ton of other teams in it, but Michigan and Miami, 2 heavy hitters when it comes to NIL. So was this really an NIL? Was this decision predicated on NIL?
No, the end of the day, it didn't come down to money. And talked to some people around Calvin Russell. It's really clear that the relationship with Fran Brown just made all the difference at the end. And, going into, it was Saturday, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it was.
like Fran Brown didn't know he was going to Syracuse. A lot of people in his camp thought he was going to Michigan, but that relationship with Fran won out end of the day. Now, money-wise, if this was a strictly who has the biggest bag recruitment, I think he'd be going to Michigan right now. Mm-hmm. I'm not, super specific on the financials, but I know Michigan definitely had a higher offer on the table than Syracuse.
Yeah, so that's pretty incredible. Calvin Russell to Syracuse. And, I mean, of course, they have the money on the table. I mean, they're not offering them $0.
Of course, yeah.
But kind of interesting to see this go back to old school recruiting. It came down to the opportunities, the relationships, and he's heading to Syracuse.
Yeah, but the flip side of that, too, is now that Syracuse has to hold on to him until National Signing Day, which is going to be a huge push for Fran Brown.
All right, another big NIL battle, I think was a big NIL battle. Wide receiver Booby Feaster off the board. He commits to USC over A&M, LSU, amongst others. I mean, this was a big-time recruitment for Booby Feaster. Did USC really step it up here late because they weren't always the favorite?
Yeah, USC stepped up big time. Reported this morning in a story that Booby Feaster is expected to land a deal with USC that's going to pay him a multi-million-dollar deal over multiple years. And USC stood up when it needed to near the end of his recruitment with a really lucrative financial offer. And we've seen USC do that again and again with Mark Bowman and Luke Waffle. And USC wins out again on the trail.
All right, you wrote, let's reference that article you wrote about NIL collectives facing clearinghouse delays, recruiting offers soar, quote, deals ain't stopping. So you're referring to the new kind of Deloitte rules where there's a clearinghouse that has to clear deals. How's this going so far? And it's early, so we're not here to just jump all over the NCAA just to do so, but what's the early returns?
Yeah, so the story kind of goes down two paths, right? So you have recruiting. We just talked about it. There's more money being spent in recruiting than we've seen in a long time. And then on the flip side of that, you have revenue sharing has started in college sports. And with that, you have this new NIL clearinghouse run by Deloitte and college sports leaders. And every NIL collective deal that we've talked about in the last 4 or 5 years now has to go through this clearinghouse. Well, a lot of people need to be paid from these third-party entities, and there's quite the holdup right now in these clearinghouses and deals trying to go through the clearinghouse and reported on it in the story. And, there's a situation with an SEC school where the event the athlete was supposed to participate in has passed because the clearinghouse hasn't responded. And then there's another situation where a Big Ten school has almost $150,000 on the table for an athlete, and the clearinghouse has yet to, give them any decision in the last almost 20 days now.
So there was a lot of people in college football. There were some ADs that came out and spoke about revenue sharing and how this was going to even the playing field when it came to NIL, and dollars would be equal and they would rein in spending and everything would just magically be under control again. So has that happened? Has spending been reined in by revenue sharing?
No. The spending is out of control as it has ever been. And, maybe in a year, once this whole revenue sharing system kind of sets into place, we'll see some normalcy like people have anticipated and hoped for. But nothing has changed in the first, 8-9 days of July. Yeah.
So ADs or schools that were thinking that this was going to happen, and that collectives were going to just magically disappear. But instead, we're seeing, yes, revenue sharing is happening, but collectives are still are collectives still being funded now that revenue sharing is here, or are they just a thing of the past?
Collectives have taken on this new form of being the unofficial bagman of recruiting. When we talk about all these numbers being tossed around and recruits being paid before they even step foot on campus, that's coming from the collective. That's not, that's not coming from the school. That's coming through the collective. So it's just the next evolution of paying athletes in college sports, and it's not a finished product, and it definitely isn't a perfect product.
Yeah, and the thought was, well, the richest programs shouldn't get the richest or the best prospects, but that was happening well before NIL, and it's probably not going to stop anywhere soon, right?
Yeah, and the flip side of that too, Josh, is there's a quote in the story, like 2 years ago, not everyone was bought into like NIL and paying for a top quarterback or in the portal, but now revenue sharing's here, every Power 4 school in the country is spending some kind of money on a quarterback, a wide receiver, a recruit now. So that means that the tide has, it's come up in how much people have to spend, and we're seeing that in recruiting now too. So yeah, it's crazier than it's ever been. And there's supposed to be, the structure that is still being sorted through as we speak.
All right. Well, we'll see. Pete Nakos, NIL Insider, thanks for dropping by the Inside Scoop.
You bet. Thanks, Josh.